Welcome to All Never Sleeps, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. We're still aspiring to be viral. We've downgraded to be merely adequately caffeinated, and we're continuing to be a proudly sponsored weekly YouTube show all about Notre Dame football and a fan base that can probably not stumble over its words like I just did. I'm Eric Hansen in South Bend. He's Tyler James in LaPorte, both of blueandgold.com, both Lightning Dodgers, and both here to say we don't need no stinking bye week. Notre Dame does, and we're going to talk about how Notre Dame is looking a little bit past the halfway point. Who's emerged as the surprises, who's maybe lagged behind expectations, and who may still emerge in the second half. We're going to look at what's ahead on the schedule, a massive recruiting weekend, and as always, your questions. So start filling up that question portal. This is
Football Never Sleeps.
All right. As Eric mentioned, Football Never Sleeps is presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. At Academy Sports and Outdoors, we proudly honor our brave military and first responders for everything you do to protect our nation and serve our local communities. We appreciate your unmatched dedication and countless sacrifices. And from October 19th through November 11th, we're giving you our salute with 10% off your sports and outdoors purchases at your local Academy store and online at academy.com/discount. Exclusions apply. We thank everyone for tuning in, even on Notre Dame's bye week, to hang out with us. Shout out to all of our live viewers. We see you in the chat: Brian, Jeff, Scott, T. Dawson, Irish fan. Thank you all for showing up. And thank you, everyone who's watching this on replay as well. No matter when you're watching, we ask that you hit the like button and make sure you subscribe to our channel. You should also consider a subscription to blueandgold.com. New users can sign up for the first week of an annual subscription for just $1. Head over to blueandgold.com, hit the join now button at the top of the page, and you can take advantage of the new subscriber deal. All right, let's get started with our opening drive. And this is something that we started to talk about during our post-game takeaways videos, which was temporarily labeled as a Football Never Sleeps video because of my poor thumbnail creation that Eric thankfully pointed out. Otherwise, I don't know when I would have noticed it. But let's talk about Notre Dame's bye week priorities. After a 6-1 start, Notre Dame is now in its final off week this regular season to gear up for 5 games in November. What do you think should be Notre Dame's top priorities this week?
So for me, I came up with 5. Do you want to go back and forth or just me list my 5?
You can just list your 5. I don't have like
I won't go into great
order.
detail. We can tease them out if somebody's interested in hearing more about them. So for me, I think the number one priority, I think this is a really different bye week than the other one. It's getting healthy. You've had some players that have had nagging injuries they've been playing with or not playing with, like Devontae Smith and Jaden Greathouse. You want to make sure those guys are right. But even somebody like Leonard Moore, who was out for a while with a high ankle sprain, make sure he's 100%. Get him feeling good. Noah Burnett, whatever's going on with him, with his kicking, he's had the hip injury. I know that Marty Biaggi, before he missed the kicks in the USC game, had wanted to make sure he got rest. So number 1 is health. Number 2, get Eric Schmidt ready to be the number 1 kicker, no matter what's going on with Noah Burnett. Number 3, I'd say add some offensive gears. This is the time where you can get creative with adding more pages to the playbook. For example, a bigger package. We saw the Flanagan, Matt Jeffrey package, I think maybe on 4 snaps. Get that refined, have that power package ready to go. I think there's some other stuff that Notre Dame can do offensively. Recruiting is always in my top 5, and that's usually Marcus's number 1 thing. And then I had, I think that was it. I think that's 5, unless I didn't count correctly. Last thing is young guys. Go comb the roster of the guys that haven't played yet. There's some like Will Black and Christopher Burgess. If those guys can help you, you need to decide, okay, you only got 5 games left. So if they haven't played, you can play them in 4 of the 5 in the regular season and still get that redshirt year.
Mm-hmm.
But is there somebody like Will Black that's worth burning a redshirt year for, playing 5 games if you need some depth in the offensive line and get him some experience? So that would be number 5. And I will learn to count during the bye week so that I will not forget what number I'm on next week.
I wasn't counting. I was marking mine in terms of what you said that I also had on my list, but I wasn't keeping track because then there were some things that you had that I didn't. So I was like, oh, I'm not sure what number he's on. To follow up on the red shirting part of it, like my personal opinion, because the next game is Boston College. Like, I don't think anyone that hasn't played yet is worth burning a red shirt for. I don't think that you need to go into those ranks to beat Boston College, personally, just knowing how bad Boston College is. And we'll talk about Notre Dame's remaining schedule later. But I do think in terms of, yes, finding ways to get those guys involved, if there's ways to do that in 4 of the 5 final last games, I think is definitely something that Notre Dame should work on. You mentioned health. That was on my list. If Billy Trouth is out for some extended time, make sure that Notre Dame is continuing to build chemistry out with another new starter. Sullivan Absher replaced him in the game. I would assume that would be the direction Notre Dame would go if that's what is needed. Maybe they would change beyond that, but I just think there's so many moving pieces already that I don't know that Notre Dame would want to totally do something differently than that. The short yardage plan, self-scout, make sure that Notre Dame tries to find something that works. What has worked, what hasn't worked. I think that includes finding a role for Cooper Flanagan. We saw some of him, like you mentioned, in this past weekend against USC. So I think that could be a potential help. On defense, maybe sharpening some of the pass rush packages, figuring out, okay, what isn't working, what could be doing better. Notre Dame has improved its pass rush, but I think they could probably cull some things that have worked well and maybe find some areas to improve on there, and just solidify what's been going well with the coverage scheme tweaks, changes, improved technique, whatever you want to give the improvement credit to, making sure that is continuing to be in a good spot moving forward. Those would be on my list, and recruiting as well. That it's, as someone who covered recruiting for so long, that's almost always a given to me that should be a priority. But definitely when you have more time to do that this week than other weeks, getting out on the road and meet some guys is a good idea.
Right. And Marcus mentioned in the press conference Saturday that they would be giving the players some time off at the end of the week. So that's when they'll go out recruiting. So they're not going to skip practice for that. But they are on fall break. They do not have school this week. So that's what's allowing them to give them a little bit of a break to get away.
All right, let's get into Notre Dame's remaining schedule a little bit, and then we can hop into our questions. I wanted to rank Notre Dame's 5 remaining games in order of difficulty, with 5 being the easiest and 1 being the hardest. And then also, as we go through that, like, what's one thing to worry about with each of these opponents? So what do you have? And go ahead, Eric.
Oh, I was just laughing because I know who number 5 is when you said what one thing to worry. I was scrambling in my brain for one. And I actually came up with one while I was talking myself through it. So I'm ready whenever you want me to start counting down the 5. I'm glad that I have we'll be doing it incrementally so I won't mess up the order.
All right. Yeah, go ahead. What do you have at number 5? Is it the same as mine?
Yeah, it is the same as yours. It's Boston College. And I would have said 3 weeks ago, I would not have had them at the bottom, even though Stanford beat them. I thought Boston College was the better team, but they are suddenly a train wreck. But I think the one thing that Notre Dame needs to be careful of is not the players not considering them a train wreck. Notre Dame not only needs to continue to win to help their playoff case, and when I'm saying this, not just inclusion, but moving up in seeding, they need to improve. And I remember in 2015, Notre Dame was in kind of a similar situation as this. They had lost to Clemson. That was a 4-team playoff, but Notre Dame had been in that top 4. And then they went and played Boston College, a really bad Boston College team, and barely beat them at Fenway Park and dropped in the CFP ratings. So Notre Dame has to take this game seriously. I think that's the thing because we're all looking at BC. They just changed their quarterback. Their defense is awful. They have one of the worst running games in the country. It's suddenly become a train wreck, and you wonder how invested these players are at this point. With a former Penn State head coach coaching them, and maybe he'll end up with the same fate. I don't know if 2 years in they're going to pull the plug on him, but this went bad really fast.
And you're always more on top of the playoff stuff than I am. Is it that next week when the first rankings come out, or is it a week after that?
So it'll be 3 days after the BC game.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that would be the last impression they have before going into ranking them for the first time. And no, they always say that it's not, the rankings are something that can change drastically from week to week versus like the perspective that some people have that like what happens the first week, they have to like be changed in order and stuff like that. So I know there's debates about that stuff, but it would be nice to have a nice statement right before they go into the room and hash things out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I have Boston College at 5 at number 5 as well. Wow. That was easy for me to say. They changed their starting quarterback. So maybe he gives them a spark. Grayson James, good last name. Certainly he has. He replaced Dylan Lonergan as the starter in that UConn game, which they lost. Their passing offense in terms of yards has been good. They're ranked 29th, 272.4 yards per game, but that's in part because they can't run and they're always behind. So like there's a reason why the yards go up. Their passing efficiency isn't that great, but their passing yards have been good. So something to watch. They have a pretty a receiver they like to rely on pretty consistently, and that's Lewis Bond. He already has 50 catches this season for 505 yards, but he doesn't have a receiving touchdown, so that sort of explains a little bit how much BC has struggled to score at times too. So those are the things that I would look for. But yeah, I think that's the easiest game on the schedule, and as long as Notre Dame's not sleepwalking into Boston College, it should be able to come out with a victory there.
And for those of you saying, boy, these guys know a lot about Boston College, the way our work is set up, we work for online, and we also have a print magazine, and we did a lot of Boston College work last week. So we want to show off our knowledge of Boston College.
Yeah, I can't tell you anything else about what the teams are about to talk about, but no, I'm kidding. But let's get into the rest of the four. Who do you have at number 4, Eric?
I think this may surprise you and may surprise some of our viewers, and it's Syracuse. They have not been the same team, and we'll talk about why they're not 3 when we get to the number 3 team. But Syracuse is very one-dimensional, like Boston College. They don't run the ball well. They don't protect their quarterback, which is now Ricky Collins. Steve Angeli he was good enough in the early part of the season to overcome a lot of their deficiencies. Not anymore. No running game, can't protect their quarterback, not a very good defense. They're not the train wreck that Boston College is, but they really have regressed as a team after losing Steve Angeli and beating Clemson.
Yeah, I ended up with Syracuse at 4 as well. Before I sat down to do this, I don't know that I would have done that. There was a few weeks ago where Tyler Horkin and I did a point counterpoint where we debated who was the worst team left on Notre Dame's schedule. And I had said Stanford, and he went with Purdue. And I think they're both not very good teams, but Boston College and Syracuse, I think, have sunk below that. Now, maybe Syracuse is better than Purdue, but I think without Steve Angeli, Syracuse just is not a very good football team. That Collins, the number of yards that Collins has thrown for in a game, Ricky Collins, the new quarterback for Syracuse without Steve Angeli, has not matched what they're currently averaging, which means that he's lowered that number and he still isn't reaching their average. They're currently averaging 294.3 yards per game, which is still number 14, which is how high Steve Angeli had Syracuse in the passing yards category. And 229 yards against Duke, 279 yards against SMU, and 126 against Pitt for Ricky Collins. So that's not a great look for the way that Syracuse offense is going. Maybe Steve Angeli can inspire them with his teammates to beat his former teammates, but The Syracuse team is going downhill fast right now. All right, who do you have as your number 3 team, Eric?
I have Stanford, which I think is going to surprise some people, but I happen to be, you did too. We were both awake when Stanford beat Florida State Saturday night, but I was up till pretty early the next morning doing my top 25. I didn't have either of those teams in it, but not only did Stanford beat Florida State, they got fined for their fans storming the field, which is hilarious that Stanford would get fined for that. When you look at their statistical shell, I do this thing in my behind the ballot column every week where I look at this kind of stat matrix of how Notre Dame is faring in the national rankings in 9 offensive, 9 defensive, and 5 special teams categories, and then turnover margin. And I do it for all the opponents too, so you can kind of get an idea of how they match up in different areas. Stanford still looks like the worst team in that. There's not a lot of redeeming qualities. The one thing that they're very good at is run defense.
Right.
They are a decent run defense. Everything else, they're pretty way below average. But they found ways to win games. They found a way to beat Boston College, and they found a way to beat Florida State in the conference. And that says something, and it's going to be out at Stanford. It's also going to be the gateway to whether Notre Dame gets into the playoff or not. If they lose that game, they would not make the playoff. So that's what put them at number 3 for me.
Yeah, there's a chance that Stanford could really embrace that spoiler role if that's like the make or break game for Notre Dame. The red zone defense numbers are decent, but the run defense is the thing that stands out. But I think that's also influenced by the fact that they're so bad against the pass that teams don't maybe dedicate themselves to running the football when they can throw the ball against Stanford pretty well. But it does seem like Stanford seemed like a program that was struggling to figure out how to win any game, and now they're figuring out, putting some things together. So they're we're talking about a rather weak end of the schedule for Notre Dame, but in terms of what Notre Dame has left, I think they're right there in the middle in terms of difficulty. All right, who do you have at number 2?
I have Navy at number 2. They're undefeated. They're getting votes in the top 25 poll, not very many of them, but they're getting some support. They haven't played. Their schedule is kind of backloaded. They have their tougher games at the end of the year. After they play Notre Dame, they have South Florida coming up not too long after that. So the tougher teams in their conference that they play come up after the Notre Dame game, and they have struggled to win some close games against really average teams. But you still look at them, they have a great quarterback in Blake Horvath who can throw and is a real threat in running the ball. You look at their offensive numbers, there's a lot to like about them offensively. Usually when Navy is really dangerous, they have a defense to go along with it. They are really bad at defending the pass, and pretty below average for a team that hasn't played a difficult schedule defensively. But again, they're undefeated, and they throw that curveball of an offense at you, and that makes them dangerous.
Yeah, somehow we ended up with the same order of our teams. I didn't think that would be the case. I thought we might have some disagreements. I have Navy at 2. The offensive challenges that Navy presents is the reason to be worried. That the way they run the ball, the way that they're willing to pass the ball more. They're averaging 167 yards per game through the air. And I know they started to throw a little bit more last year, and they only had 123 yards per game last year. So that they're continuing to up that. And so how does Notre Dame react to that? We've seen
6th in passing efficiency. So they're good.
Right. So we've seen Chris Ash struggle out at the gate with Notre Dame's defense. Will he struggle out the gate trying to defend this Navy offense, which is so different than anything else that you see on the schedule? So that's why I have Navy at number 2.
It'll be a test for Chris Ash. I'm always curious when Notre Dame has a new defensive coordinator, how they do against that defense. The good news is Marcus Freeman's been around for it, and the rest of the defensive staff So I think there will be some really good input. But I'll tell you what, Al Golden, especially the game over in Ireland when Navy had a new offensive coordinator and it was a really different look. I mean, he just was so good at adjusting during the game. So that'll be something to look at.
All right. So why do you have Pittsburgh at number 1?
A couple of reasons. One is they are very good at some things that will test Notre Dame, and also sequentially. It's not the Navy hangover, the triple option hangover that it used to be before they changed the way that Navy could do cut blocking, that the triple option teams could do that. You'd end up with usually some injured defensive linemen a lot of years that Notre Dame played those teams. You don't have that, but you do have the schematic curveball of having to go from the number 1 rushing offense and the 118 passing offense and flipping that and playing the 104 rushing offense and the 11 passing offense. So Notre Dame had this last year, and I'm not comparing Pittsburgh's passing offense to USC's, but going from Army to USC was a really difficult thing for the players, and Al Golden admitted as much after the USC game. He said that was a really tough gear shift. So again, without a bye week in between, going back to a conventional offense. So what does Pitt do well? They throw the ball well. They have a new quarterback, Mason. Can you say his last name, Tyler? Do you know how to say it?
I didn't look it up, but I would guess Heinschel.
Heinschel. I'm going to guess it's Heinschel. He has replaced Eli Holstein, who I could pronounce his name, another former Alabama quarterback on the schedule who's gotten benched. But he's more multidimensional than Eli Holstein. Eli had a good passing efficiency record. He got sacked a ton. Mason doesn't get sacked as much. Pittsburgh also scored. I mean, they scored the ball. I mean, they score very well. They take advantage of what turnovers they do get. They are the number 7 run defense in the country, and that's the best team on Notre Dame's schedule by far. And what that creates is they will try to take some chances and get you into 3rd and longs and then try to take advantage of you there, and they blitz the crap out of you. They are 3rd in the country in tackles for loss. They're 14th in sacks. And they can turn you over. They've done it in some games. They're pretty good on 3rd down. They do get teams in 3rd and long. They're not good. They're not a good passing defense. They're not good at protecting their quarterback. They turn the ball over on offense too much. But there's enough danger spots here where they can make it interesting, and especially being on the road.
Yeah, they just feel like the most well-rounded team that's left on Notre Dame's schedule. They're not very good at running the football, but otherwise, like they don't seem really bad at many things. Whereas there's obvious weaknesses on some of the other teams, and it'll be an interesting challenge coming out of that Navy game, like you mentioned, going back on the road, playing at Pittsburgh. Hasn't been as difficult of a challenge the last couple times Notre Dame's done that, but it'll be a good measuring stick for Notre Dame, that sort of the halfway mark of that, or I guess it would be the halfway mark of what's left on the remaining schedule. So I think that's the toughest game, and we'll see how Notre Dame responds to it.
If you look at all 12 opponents in terms of total defense, they're the 3rd best behind Texas A&M, who's 20th, Miami 16th, Pitt is 29th. The really scary thing is I'm looking at the stat matrix here for those teams going against CJ Carr. Here are the rankings of the teams left on the schedule, what their pass efficiency defense is: 98, 91, 101, 88, and 89. So not a lot of, I'm sorry. It's 91, 101, 88, 89, 121 are the rankings for them. So,
yeah. All right. Well, let's hop into the questions. Let's start with some of these specific to the opponents since it's what we're talking about. Scott Fegan said, "Is Pitt or Navy the trap game?"
Pitt is the trap game for me. I think they'll be ready for Navy, and they will not have probably expended too much energy on Boston College. Navy's at home, Pitt's on the road, and I think that post triple option hangover is still a real thing.
Yeah, I would agree there. Rajan says, will this week be used for some Navy prep?
Absolutely. I think they tend to work on Navy a little bit, during different times of the year. I know that they used to do it in the spring. They would do a little bit during fall camp, and they probably will do some this week just so that they aren't trying to cram for it all in 1 week after Boston College. And that's not a diss on Boston College. If they were playing a better opponent than Boston College, I think they would do a little bit of Navy this week as well.
Scott Fegan says, but who has Pitt played?
I'm going to have to look up their schedule.
I know it.
I think they have NC State this week. You have it in front of you?
Yeah. Yes. They lost to Louisville by 7, who just beat Miami. And they lost to West Virginia in overtime. That's not a good loss. A Louisville loss is fine, even though that was a home loss. But yeah, I mean, they've beaten up on some of the also-rans in the ACC. They whooped up on Boston College. That was Mason Heinschel's first start after Pittsburgh lost 2 games in a row. They changed their quarterback and have put up at least 30 each week since. They did beat Florida State, which obviously that win is diminished after Stanford beat Florida State too.
But they beat them on the road, which was impressive.
Sure, and they handled Syracuse pretty easily.
On the road.
Wins early in the season against Duquesne and Central Michigan, but I'm sure that doesn't make any difference to anybody. So, yeah, I mean, maybe there's a chance they're ranked by the time Notre Dame plays them, but they're not a team that's ranked. So, I mean, we're comparing them to the teams left on Notre Dame's schedule, not in terms of like the best teams in college football. I think that we just got to make sure that we're being clear there.
And the ACC schedules, I was looking at some of the teams, like Georgia Tech has a pretty clean path to getting to the ACC championship game. So kind of does Virginia. But you look at Pitt, after they play Notre Dame, they have Georgia Tech on the road, and then they have Miami. That gets pretty sticky for them once they hit the Notre Dame game.
Mike DeVoy says, sounds like ND should be able to control the trenches against Pitt.
In terms of Notre Dame's front 7 against Pitt's offensive line, yes, that should be a big advantage for Notre Dame. When you flip it, Pitt's pesky. I mean, they get a lot of sacks. They penetrate and they get a lot of tackles behind the line of scrimmage. They take chances. So I don't know that it's the mismatch going the other way. They've given some people some problems with their pass rush and with their run defense.
All right, let's go back to some of the questions we got earlier in the show from Brian Habermill. Excuse me. Is the defense stopping the run better under Chris Ash? My untrained eye sees less stunting in line games. Maybe I'm just seeing things.
Well, I'll answer the first part of it. They are 21st right now in the country in run defense, which is really good for a Notre Dame team. Al Golden never had them in the top 25 in run defense. He was close one of the 3 years he was here. But they didn't play a heavy box very much. I think Chris Ash did that in the USC game. And we probably are going to not have to see that the rest of the year, just because these teams, other than Navy, whatever they do to play against them. But once you play Stanford, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, and Boston College, they're all built the same. They're all very pass-heavy teams with an awful running game to go with it. So in the Navy game is going to skew those numbers for a week. I think Notre Dame has a chance to finish with a top 25 run defense, and I think that's quite an accomplishment. So I do think there's an emphasis on it, and I think they're good at it. They've kind of found their rhythm with it, and they're not going to face a good running back or a good running offense the rest of the year, other than Navy.
Yeah, I certainly the game plan versus USC will probably be different than it was versus other teams, but Like against USC, Notre Dame put an extra safety in the box a lot of times. Like Adon Schuler
Right.
spent the majority of his snaps playing in the box, even though USC is obviously a good passing team, but it wanted to prioritize making sure that USC didn't get going with the run. So there's different things that Notre Dame can choose to do. I would be a bit surprised if it did that against poor running teams moving forward, but it does seem like the run defense has improved as the season's gone on.
Right. To compare it, USC was incredibly balanced coming into the Notre Dame game. They were number 2 in pass offense, 16 in run offense. So they were very balanced and very good at both. None of these teams do both things in high quantity. Navy does it both in quality. I mean, their pass efficiency number 6 is really good, but taking Navy out, the other 4 are very one-dimensional and they're not good. Even though they throw for a lot, none of them are, really good pass efficiency teams at this point.
Jeff Stevens says, how soon will we have a path forward for the place kicking?
I talked to Marty Biaggi about this going into the USC game, and they definitely have a pecking order. They've definitely said, okay, if it's not Noah Burnett, it's Eric Schmidt. And it went back and forth between Schmidt and Marcello Diamede early in the season, and they weren't pressed for it because they were confident that Noah Burnett would be the guy. I think with Eric, the issue is Marty Biaggi was saying it's a really huge leap for a freshman to be a good college kicker, a true freshman to be a good college kicker. We've seen it before, but it's unusual. And some of that is just getting used to the mental part of it and being accurate. Eric Schmidt can kick it for days. I mean, he's got the leg to do it. It's just being consistently with his accuracy. That's the issue with him. But they've definitely decided that's the way it was going to go. When I talked to him, I said, are you out of the woods yet with Noah Burnett physically? And he said, after the bye week, if he's still good, I feel like we'll be out of the woods then. So what happens in the USC game? He misses a couple of kicks. Now, we don't know if that's related to the hip. I would guess as badly as that field goal was missed that it was related to the hip. But that's something that we can ask Marcus about Monday going into the BC game. But as I mentioned in my 5 priorities, I say treat Eric Schmidt like he's the number 1 kicker right now. Get him mentally prepared to have that role, because I think at some point he's got to have it.
Yeah, I think it could, the weather could have played a role too. We don't know. It didn't look like the holds were bad. Like that was something that didn't seem to be an issue. But yeah, I don't know. I think Notre Dame's got to get it figured out in terms of how soon. I don't know that anyone can predict that exactly, but they are trying to find an answer. And the Eric Schmidt thing, it makes me nervous because he was struggling to keep kickoffs in bounds. And that's something that T. Dawson mentioned in his question. Jadarian Price aside, our special teams play was garbage, 1 missed PAT, 1 missed short field goal, and multiple kickoffs out of bounds. What's the fix? Does Brandon Aubrey still have eligibility? What's your take on the Schmidt kickoffs out of bounds?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what was going on there. I don't know if he was trying to be too fine. Usually he just kicks it out of the back of the end zone or kicks it into the end zone. So I'm a little perplexed on why that was an issue. Again, playing on a sloppy field, maybe that affected him, and maybe the wind was gustier than we were getting a read on up in the press box. It was supposed to be a very gusty day, and it didn't feel like it when we were walking. Tyler Horka and I walked over to the stadium pretty late from where we do our pregame radio and stuff, and there was no wind at that time, but it may have changed during the game. So that he has been remarkably consistent. He had kicked his first one out of bounds against Purdue, and every kick going into the USC game had been a touchback since. So I'm going to say bad day at the office for him, but I think he'll get it together. I think he's pretty good. But the thing is, you're probably not going to have a game where a field goal is going to decide it in November.
Right.
But you are likely going to have games where a field goal will decide it in December and January. So you better get that. If Eric Schmidt is going to be your guy in December, you better get him used to that role and get him used to kicking in games at this point. So I think that's a discussion that has to be had.
Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma because the other thing that Notre Dame needs to figure out is its short yardage issue, and a lot of times Marcus Freeman is not afraid to go for it instead of attempting a field goal. It's like, well, what would be better for Notre Dame moving forward, to get more practice on field goals or get more practice on short yardage situations? I'm not sure what that would be. And Scott Fegan even asked, what does Marcus Freeman spend more time with the kicking problems or fixing the issues inside the 5-yard line?
Well, I mean, I think he leaves it to Marty Biaggi to fix the kicking issues. That's one great thing about having a former kicker as your special teams coach. So he can focus on the short yardage with Mike Denbrock, and they can work on that. I do think I'm wondering if that Cooper Flanagan, Matt Jeffrey package turns out to be pretty good. I know Tyler Horka wasn't a big fan of it, or maybe it was Jack. I can't remember. One of those two guys were like, ugh. But I think it has some potential. I really like Cooper Flanagan in those power formations. And I think as he gets used to playing again, he played 4 snaps. I think the first game after the bye week, we'll see a lot more of him.
Yeah, Ed Straub said that he saw Matt Jeffrey inserted basically as a blocking wide receiver on some of those plays. Why not just use a tight end, he asked.
It's funny because when you look at the Pro Football Focus grades, it counts Matt Jeffrey as a tight end even before he lined up in that formation. Now, he's not tight end sized. He's a super physical athlete. I know Marcus Freeman was raving about how well he performs on the scout team, for example. And I don't know that Ty Washington has given you a whole lot there. I think maybe when we were talking about young players playing, I think James Flanagan's played in one game, but I think James Flanagan may be able to, after the bye week, help them. He's a guy that I would look at. Okay, what's better here? Matt Jeffrey in this? Is Flanagan better at this? The other thing that's kind of interesting is Jeffrey could catch a pass out of that. I mean, there may be a package where he goes out for a pass in that when people are used to seeing him line up to be part of the power formation. So I think Mike Denbrock has something up his sleeve, but I do think that's a good question to ask, Ed.
Yeah, I think there has to be something else that he offers besides just being a lead blocker in that package. Otherwise, couldn't James Flanagan do that? I don't know, or Jack Larson for that matter. So I don't know what they see in him. What I would imagine the fact that he is a receiver is part of it. I think I want to say at least once they at least lined him up wide. I don't know if they then motioned him.
They threw to him in one of the games. It was Purdue or Arkansas. He caught a big pass.
Yeah, that was the Arkansas game, but that was with the backups in. I don't think that was. Yeah. So yeah, they obviously believe that he could catch as a receiver. But I think they lined him up wide. But I'm not sure. I don't remember if they ended up then just motioning back into that same sort of formation that we saw more than once against USC. I haven't gone back into my full rewatch quite yet, so we'll get on that here soon. Mike DeVoy, with Devontae Smith still unavailable, if one of Moore, Gray, Golden goes down, who can Mike Mickens put in that won't get burned repeatedly? Hobbs and Tucker were disappointing in earlier appearances.
So if Moore, Gray, or Golden, well, it depends on which one of those would go down. Mark Zachary would be a guy that you would plug in to most of those equations. I don't think you would plug him in as a nickel, but he could play the boundary or the field. He's most comfortable in the field. When Leonard Moore was out, they flipped Christian Gray over to the boundary and played Mark Zachary to the field. And I think if Leonard Moore went out, that would be the plan. If Gray went out, that would be the plan. If Golden went out and Devontae Smith weren't available, I do think it would be Carson Hobbs. I think that would be your alternative at that point.
Yeah, I think there's not I don't think there's another option that we haven't seen yet. I mean, Cree Thomas would be, I think, the other guy that's not mentioned, but I don't think. I think they like what Mark Zachary and Carson Hobbs can do, and they want them to continue to grow, and they'll give them opportunities if needed. And obviously, you hope Devontae Smith gets back, and then you have more depth, and maybe Dallas Golden, maybe Dallas Golden becomes an option as an outside cornerback too, from getting some experience against
didn't
USC.
do badly in the USC game. He played well, I thought.
So maybe that's an option to consider moving forward too. T. Dawson said, having been at the game, it was hard to ascertain how well Otting did. What is your take on how he played in Craig's absence?
I'll let Tyler rave here, but I'll say quickly, I isolated on him with my binoculars, and every time I did, I was impressed. And I know that his Pro Football Focus grade was pretty decent. I was really impressed with him. I thought he stepped up.
Yeah, I thought he did a good job. Even if you just like go back and watch the highlights, some of the highlight runs, if you just watch Otting, like he's doing a good job of making key blocks in terms of keeping his guy from crossing that to the other side of the line of scrimmage. I think I want to say it was the long run Jeremiyah Love had early on in the game. He had a very good block. I think he did a pretty good job on the touchdown run that drive too. So I thought he did a pretty good job. Certainly. Things to improve on. I think he sometimes maybe gives up some ground before he gets going, which can be difficult as a center because you sort of lose some momentum with snapping the football. But I liked what I saw from Joe Otting, and I think there's definitely some reasons for optimism with him being in there for Ashton Craig. And hello to you as well, Mike Singer. Mike must be in here scouting us. He's either scouting us or scouting you chatters to see who he needs to ban from the blue and gold chats to see who's not behaving themselves. But we appreciate you being in here, Mike. What else we got? Ron Obermeyer says, can somebody confirm that Lincoln Riley did not shake Marcus Freeman's hand?
Before we get to that, I think what Mike's scouting is, he played a clip in our internal communication today of me saying if Notre Dame went 10-2, and this was not me doubting them, this is me saying that I thought they'd go 10-2 early in the season. I said I would eat a giant turkey leg on our Sunday roundtable show. And so I think Mike was seeing if I was preemptively eating the turkey leg tonight. But can someone confirm? I didn't. I can't confirm that he's a POS. But I didn't see that, but I was on my way to the locker room. So I'll let Tyler usually follows the handshakes and the hand grenade stuff. So what happened, Tyler?
I didn't see that. I was watching the other crowds. Well, first I saw Christopher Burgess running across the field and yanking USC players' towels from their pants. And so I was laughing at that, making sure no one started swinging on him for doing that. And then I saw a crowd start to gather around Kennedy Urlacher, and from above it looked like there was some pushing and shoving. It did look like there was some shoving, but it was more friendly than sinister. A lot of Notre Dame players.
I saw the replay of that part.
But I did not. So I didn't see Lincoln Riley's handshake or not. I have not gone, and I have not asked anyone to confirm whether or not.
And I don't think that's a silly question. I usually don't track that, but I do think that's a good question, and I bet Jack and Tyler Horkin know.
TD4ND, what future opponent is the sleeper?
I think they're all asleep, but I do think Pittsburgh is the biggest challenge. And when we were talking about Joe Otting, that's a team that will try to pick on him and see how good he is. And if they can find a weakness there. But I mean, Navy and Pitt are capable teams. They're capable. You get in a game with anybody and you have multiple turnovers, it can become a competitive game very quickly. Those are the two teams that have the elements that could challenge Notre Dame the most in a game like that.
Yeah, I think those are the two clear best teams. And so if you want to disqualify them, then I would say Stanford maybe is a team that, I don't know, they've done better so far this season than I've expected of them. So maybe by the end of the season, they're they're feisty in a way that you would not expect to make them a sleeper. But to me, it seems clear that Pittsburgh and Navy are like a cut above the rest of the opponents on Notre Dame's schedule. Jeff Stevens says, who do you guys think will end up as the coach at Penn State? Do you think Dabo Swinney is safe?
I'm not sure. I haven't studied. I saw the odds today and I've already forgotten them. So I'm really, you have so much bandwidth, and that is outside of where I want to put my bandwidth. I think it's a great question. I just, when they name the person, I'll be, oh, that's interesting. Is Dabo safe at Clemson? I think he's earned that at this point. I think if they end up with a losing record, then I think next year becomes more interesting. And I do think they have to have a sit down at the end of the season and say, what's going wrong here? Because that's a team that didn't fall apart because of injuries. It's fallen apart for other reasons mostly. And, again, maybe they need to adjust what they're doing. They seem to be able to recruit. They seem to be able to develop players, but their offense stinks. And they should be a lot better with how many guys you see in the mock drafts. And you're like, how are they not better? Even if they're all defensive linemen, how are they not better than what they are? And I think they've gotten a little bit more into the transfer portal. I think they have to play that game way better than what they're doing.
Yeah, I think Dabo's safe. He has more on his resume than anyone else that is close to being fired. And so I think he'll be safe.
But James Franklin had a lot on his resume too. Dabo has won
not comparatively
big games and national championships.
Yeah. So yeah, the James Franklin thing is a bit surprising to me that they went ahead and did that. But who will it be? I don't know. Matt Rule was one of the hot names early. That's not a name that excites me if I was a Penn State fan, but I'm not certain what they're going to do. And I think I've seen some people joking around about Brian Kelly going there. That would be kind of funny. But it'll be interesting to see what happens there. There's certainly some interesting jobs that are coming open this carousel cycle. Rajon said, is this part of the schedule, especially BC, Syracuse, and Stanford, time to experiment with things in short yardage?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that they will work against good teams. But again, Pittsburgh is a good short yardage defense. So against them, that would work. Navy's usually pretty clever. And when Tyler gets done answering the question, I'll give you guys the odds that I got this morning in an email of the next Penn State head coach, just since I did such a sloppy job of answering that question. It was a good question. Go ahead, Tyler, answer that one, and then I'll tell them the Penn State.
Yeah, guys. I mean, I wouldn't, I guess, yes, experiment. I think the experimenting needs to happen in practice. I guess my thought moving forward is like, certainly in like goal-to-go situations is different, right? Because there's less ground to cover for a defense, so they're going to play different defenses regardless of what you line up in. But like at the 40-yard line, if it's 4th and 1, spread them out. Like it doesn't seem like Notre Dame's getting any advantage from bringing all the extra bodies into the box. Like just do a normal Jeremiyah Love handoff that seems to get more than 1 yard every other time. That would be what I would lean on. Maybe like, hey, what do we do well? What is always picking up a few yards in a regular offense, and why can't we find ways to make that work in short yardage situations? That would be the way I would hope that things maybe start to trend.
One of the options that I would try, and I thought we saw it a little bit in the game, is more CJ Carr options. Whether it's under center, whether he's quarterback draw, whatever, I would like to see him more involved. Not every time, but have that as a more viable option than kind of taking him out of that. Okay, yeah, here's the Penn State odds. So at 3-1, it's Matt Rule. Bill O'Brien, who is the BC coach, who's 1-6, and who was the coach between Joe Paterno and James Franklin. He's 4-1. Kurt Signetti, with his new contract extension, is still 6-1. Lane Kiffin 8-1. Manny Diaz 10-1. Urban Meyer 12-1. Joe Brady 14-1. Will Stein 16-1. Brent Key, that's Georgia Tech coach. It gets silly after that. John Gruden's on here. Clark Lee is way up there. Ed Orgeron 25-1. I think I saw somebody say Eli Drinkwitz in the comments 25-1. Let's see who's way down. Nick Saban 50-1, and Brian Kelly is also 50-1. So Mike Elko 40-1. I mean, it's a good job. I don't think it's a great job. But
the standards are
I'd
very
rather do
like
my job than be the
if
Penn
James
State
Franklin's
head
going to get fired, the standards are high, right? Like that is not an easy job to go into, and it's not an easy job in terms of Penn State being Penn State to begin with. So I think they're going to have to throw a lot of money at someone, which seems to be anyone right now. But it'll be interesting to see who wants to take that challenge.
Marcus Freeman wasn't on that list, so. And let's talk about that for a second. I mean,
Sure.
I do not believe Marcus Freeman's going anywhere after this season. Maybe down the road, but I don't think that guy is going anywhere.
All right. Bob Alvey says, curious to those that attended the game, how was the atmosphere? It didn't sound very loud on my TV copy. Most times I don't think NBC does a good job with sound mixing with crowd noise.
I'll tell you what, I thought the atmosphere was really pretty cool. And one of the things that I can measure it by is when we get done with our interviews, and the interview stuff, by the time we get down there and they get them started, it's about an hour after the game by the time we get done with those. And then I went and said, okay, I'm going to drive home and do my work at home because they close the press box fairly quickly after the interviews and stuff. So I don't want to start and then have to restart. But the people that lingered in the parking lot in the rain partying was impressive. And the traffic, people that lingered to the end of the game was impressive. And so I thought it was a really good atmosphere given how much it was raining. I mean, a lot of people would have just said, you know what, let's go watch it inside somewhere and finish it. And they wanted to linger in that stadium. They wanted to drink that up. I liked it. I thought the atmosphere was good.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. Like, I don't think Notre Dame's going to be among one of the loudest stadiums in college football. That's just not going to happen. Not as big as some, certainly. So, but I think it's been getting better consistently. And I thought it was a pretty good, especially given the elements. I thought it was a pretty good crowd on Saturday night. Was very into the game. Responded sort of accordingly on officials' calls and when it's time to get loud on third downs. And go ahead, you go on, tell them I think I know what you were going to tell them.
They preemptively booed the refs as they were introduced before the game, and the refs definitely lived up to it. And they also booed the USC band at halftime, which was pretty funny.
I didn't see. So the last couple times, not this weekend against USC, but when we go down to the post-game press conference, we sort of work through the crowd on the concourse to go to the media area. And earlier this season, on a couple of instances, I've seen guys who I believe are refs who no longer have their stripes on. It's like they quickly change into like a more of a plain clothes look. Like they still have black pants on, and it's like a white Under Armour shirt. And I'm fairly certain those are officials. I don't know who else they would be, but especially if it's like a group of like 6 or 7 guys or whatever it is. Like, so I think that's who it is, but I did not see them. It was a bigger crowd after the USC game. People were, I think, slower to funnel out of the stadium because of the ending and being so excited about it. But and maybe wanting to see any post-game fireworks on the field or above the stadium as they've been playing or shooting off fireworks at Notre Dame Stadium too. All right, Dynasty ISP says, can you ask Eric what's his favorite ND win against USC?
Probably for me, as I've been covering them, I mean, I had watched some incredible games when I was a kid before I was because I'd always watch that game. The 2012 game, because it meant so much. Notre Dame hadn't been number one in about 30 years, and they were playing with that number one, and this was about going to the national championship game. This was about Notre Dame being back, and I know they got stomped in the national championship game, but this was the start of Notre Dame coming back. This is the start of what we're seeing now with Marcus Freeman. That was a huge, important game, so that would be my favorite.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most memorable one. I wasn't at that game, but at least I don't think I was. But for Notre Dame to win that game was obviously important. Last year's game was pretty thrilling, I would say. That was a fun game to cover, and obviously pushed Notre Dame into where it ended up going in the playoffs. So I think those were pretty good.
And it was really difficult for me not to say the Bush push game, because had Notre Dame come back on the map for good in that game, that would be the all-time USC Notre Dame game that I had covered. It was in the moment. People, I mean, there were a lot of national media there. They were saying this is the best game I've ever seen anywhere. The fact that Notre Dame lost it probably diminishes it for Notre Dame fans, but it was amazing. But Notre Dame then 2 years later was 3-9. So it wasn't the watershed moment that kind of the 2012 game was.
All right. Bob Alvey says, do you think more defensive coordinators will play Notre Dame to not let Carr beat them, giving up the loaded box to stop the run?
I mean, I think Pitt's going to play with a loaded box. I do think most of those teams will say to us, CJ Carr, especially as the weather gets kind of crummy. Like, I don't know what the weather will be like in Boston or Boston area. It's Chestnut Hill. So you don't know what the weather's going to be like in some of these, but I think, Pitt, it's probably going to be lousy weather. So they're going to play that way. I just think more teams will just say, you know what, we're going to take our chances with CJ Carr. He's a redshirt freshman. He's a very talented redshirt freshman, but we've got no chance if we play with a light box against Jadarian Price and Jeremiyah Love. We got no chance.
Yeah, and there's more ways for it to go wrong for Notre Dame when you pass. For anyone, like passing the ball, there's just more chances. Like you could get an incomplete pass, interception, sack. Like there's just more bad outcomes that are possible. That's why stopping the run is so important, and you make teams maybe put the ball in jeopardy more often when they have to pass it, even if Notre Dame has done a pretty good job of throwing the ball. So I think we'll continue to see teams try to do their best to make sure they can stop Jeremiyah Love and Jadarian Price and challenge CJ Carr to beat him, which I think he's certainly fully capable of doing. But he's a very good quarterback, but he's not a Heisman candidate in the way that Jeremiyah Love could be. So at least yet in his career, I think there's a chance he could get there eventually. But Jeremiyah Love is living up to the hype as of late.
Every one of those teams, and I'm sorry, Pitt is actually fourth in run defense. I was looking at last week's number. They're fourth in run defense. Every one of the teams they play is better at run defense than pass defense. Syracuse is the one that's kind of equally bad at both, but the other ones, there's a marked difference between how good they are against the run and how good they are against the pass, and they're not very good against the pass. So go ahead and take your chances. You haven't stopped anybody else.
Well, we had some other things we wanted to get into, but we'll hold them till next week's Football Never Sleeps. I know they won't have played any more games, so we'll talk a little bit about like guys who have surpassed our expectations or maybe underwhelmed them. But I know I've seen a number of questions about recruiting, so I wanted to get a few quick recruiting things in here. Obviously, Notre Dame had a big recruiting visitors weekend. You can get all the scoop you want from Mike Singer and Kyle Kelly over on blueandgold.com.
They're crushing it.
Yeah, that's where you're going to get the most information. I'm not going to start spilling all their premium information over here on our YouTube page. But I will share a few predictions that have gone in as of late in terms of guys. Kimon Spell, the 4-star running back who was committed to Penn State. Vice President of Recruiting Steve Wiltfong predicted him to eventually commit to Notre Dame. He's the number 1 running back, number 9 overall in the 2027 class out of Pennsylvania. 4-star cornerback Ace Alston visited, and national recruiting reporter Greg Smith, Kyle Kelly, and Mike Singer have all now predicted him to eventually end up in Notre Dame's 2027 class. He's the number 12 cornerback and number 162 overall, according to Rivals, out of Cincinnati Anderson High School. And then 4-star offensive lineman James Halter also visited. Mike Singer predicted him to Notre Dame last week. I think Wilt Fong followed up with a prediction coming out of this weekend. He's the number 8 interior offensive lineman, number 154 overall, out of Pittsburgh Central Catholic in the 2027 class. So those are some names to watch coming out of the weekend. Many more names to watch beyond that, but those are some of the ones that I wanted to highlight here before we got out of here, just in case you guys haven't seen that. But as always, like, subscribe to blueandgold.com. That's the best place you can get the most recruiting information you can imagine. And they're going to have you covered with that stuff. And we'll see if Notre Dame can get some more commitments rolling in that 2027 class, because that's where all the action is right now.
And the good news is I can just take the intro that I did this week and do it next week. Since I promised all that stuff.
Yeah,
we were ready to go with it, but your questions take priority, and
yes,
we're glad to answer those. So we'll have some good stuff next week for you that weren't part of your questions.
Yeah, I always try to prioritize the questions because you guys are here with us now. If you're spending the time with us, we want to give you what you want. So we appreciate you guys spending time with us. We'll be back with the podcast probably late in the week is what it looks like for a Third and Gold podcast. If you haven't already, go back and check out our podcast with Lou Holtz that we recorded last week. Fun. That was a blast to do. And hopefully if you haven't checked it out, you enjoy it as well. And we will see you later this week.